You are listening to episode 4 of the Mom on Purpose podcast. Today, we're continuing our conversation about postpartum stress and mothering through stressful seasons. This is part 2 with Mandi Ehman. Welcome to Mom on Purpose podcast. If this is your first time listening, thanks for coming. The Mom on Purpose podcast is produced every week. Come back often and please subscribe in iTunes. All links and materials referenced are in the show notes, which you'll find at momonpurpose.com. Every Mom on Purpose podcast includes a quick mom verse designed to encourage you in your mothering. Today's verse is Galatians 6, verse 9. It says, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Now, this is not making some promise that if you do a good job mothering, that your children will turn out to be perfect people who all love Jesus and live perfect lives. But what it is saying is that what we do matters, and that when we sow seeds, there will be a harvest later. And I just want to encourage you in your mothering today, look at the seeds that you're sowing. Look at the things that you're doing with your children and do the faithful thing. It says, not grow weary of doing good. And so we want to be women who do not grow weary amidst the hard work of doing good in our kids' lives. So hang in there and do good to them today. Mom on Purpose listeners, I'm excited to continue our conversation today with Mandi Ehman. She blogs at lifeyourway.net, and she also has 6 kids that she homeschools, and she works from home. We're going to be talking about postpartum stress and staying connected with your family during seasons of stress in motherhood. So let's continue that conversation. Okay, I wanted to kind of transition a little bit. I know you said you've dealt with postpartum depression. And I actually probably face a different problem than some women, or maybe it's the same. I don't know. I deal with postpartum anger. And so for me, I find that my emotions are really close to the edge during those first maybe couple of months after having a baby. And so for me, that's it. But what would you say is the number one reason? We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but what contributes to stress as a postpartum mom?
Can I just say real quick that mine looks a lot like anger too. And it took someone else who was clinically depressed outside of postpartum and who described her symptoms as being anger for me to identify what I was feeling as part of the postpartum depression family. But for me, that's how we know that I'm kind of spiraling downwards, is when I start to get that, that like bubbling up inside of you anger at things that really shouldn't make you that angry.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily a sadness for me either.
Okay.
So I would say there are 2 things to this. One is external factors where, because I do work, sometimes I have deadlines and I have to meet those deadlines, and that can be very stressful and overwhelming for me. And so after my first time through postpartum depression, when we realized that kind of stress was the trigger, we've worked really hard to find ways to avoid that, either by when things start to get busy, make sure I have a babysitter or Sean takes the kids or whatever it might be, just to give me more time to meet those. The other part of that, though, is my internal expectations. So when I fall into the trap of feeling like I should be doing it perfectly, or I should be able to manage all of this, or I'm taking on more than I should because it feels, necessary, that can send me down that same spiral. And so it becomes a matter of being realistic about what I can actually accomplish and what I can accomplish with a baby, because that changes everything, right?
Yeah.
It's being willing to say, okay, for whatever reason, he's fussy and he needs me to hold him with both hands and pay attention and meet his needs. needs. And so I think that just being willing to step back, and that's such a hard thing to learn when you're in the middle of those emotions, to be able to step back and look at what's going on. Sometimes I get hot and I start to spiral down into this like stress, overwhelming feeling. And sometimes my feet are cold, and I like the most ridiculous things can be the trigger that starts to send me into this like unmanageable emotion. And so just being willing, or not even willing, but able to kind of identify those feelings before they spiral out of control and look around and see, do I just need to close my computer and go for a walk? Or do we need to change our schedule to make time for this, or whatever it might be, to kind of prevent it from getting worse and becoming something that, after our third daughter, my postpartum depression was having a major effect on our marriage. One, because we hadn't identified it as postpartum depression, and so we didn't know how to deal with it. And two, because I was so angry at Sean all the time, that it was really just affecting us. And so we've had to learn coping mechanisms with the second set of 3 babies to prevent that from happening again.
I love that you shared so openly, and you kind of did this for us a little bit, but how could you share a little bit about how a listener could overcome challenges like these? What sorts of things do you do, like you said, to have realistic expectations, and you said to identify that that's what's happening? How can a listener face postpartum depression and possibly take some action steps to deal with it?
You know, I think the first step is really saying to someone, anyone, I think I might be dealing with postpartum depression. And I think the awareness around postpartum depression in some ways have made this harder, because we feel like if I say those words, people are going to think I'm crazy or about to hurt my baby or whatever it might be. And while that's certainly an aspect of postpartum depression, that's not what it always looks like in the early stages. And so I think, but there's kind of a power in saying, hey, I'm struggling here. I feel like I'm dealing with this depression. I'm really angry and overwhelmed. That in a lot of ways that can stop I keep saying spiral, but in other ways it's like building, a pile building. So either way, whether you're viewing it as going down or going up, it can kind of stop that momentum just by saying it out loud. And so that would be the first thing, I think, whether it's your husband or your best friend or, pastor's wife or a stranger, like just saying it to someone can have a pretty big effect on stopping that momentum. Then I think I would look for like the times of day when you feel that pressure building. Now, I've never dealt with the sadness kind of depression, and so I can't really speak to what that might feel like. Although I would imagine it's the same, that you feel the sadness building or you feel a lack of feeling. I've heard people describe depression that way, as kind of a lack of feeling. So whatever it might be, but to be able to identify that emotion as it starts, and then and this is hard. I don't want to give the impression that it's easy, because when those emotions are playing, it's hard to use your rational mind to think about it. But to be able to say, okay, what is making me feel this way at this moment? And even though there's a bigger cause that comes from hormones and the adjustment of adding to your family and all those things, I think in everyday life, there's lots of little things from the physical. Sean will say, go brush your teeth. Like just, that freshness. Yeah. Sometimes reset things. To the emotional, like I feel like I'm supposed to be doing it all, or I was up all night worrying. And as I said that, I thought, and exhaustion, is a huge one. Like just trying to identify what it is that's making those feelings start to build, and be able to adjust the ones that you can. We obviously can't fix everything. We can't make our newborn sleep through the night. And if you're exclusively breastfeeding, you can't even hand them off to someone else. So that's something we kind of have to learn to live with, but we can deal with the other things being too hot or too cold, a schedule that's too full, or a laundry pile that's too high and it's making you feel overwhelmed. Sometimes taking 15 minutes to fold the laundry feels counterintuitive because you just want to ignore it and let it be. And there's plenty of times when I do just ignore the laundry and let it be.
Yeah.
But sometimes getting on top of it can make a big difference in the way you feel about the things that are happening around you.
I think that's right. Do you have any other suggestions or resources that you would recommend for postpartum moms, or just even not postpartum, but moms who are in a stressful moment and struggling to find joy?
I was thinking about this and I was having a little bit of trouble coming up with something because I'm not a huge, I guess I'm not a huge resources person, although there's plenty of things I love. But so I guess I would say really it's more about figuring out what that thing you love is. So for me, it's a cup of coffee. There's just something about having a pretty mug, and filling it with coffee, or sometimes I go through plenty of seasons where it's tea that I prefer, but, filling my mug with tea or coffee and just sitting down with it is like a breath of fresh air. Or I did, as I was saying this, look up on my shelf, and I have a couple books that I love. And one is a series by Katie Orr. Do you know her?
I don't. Tell me.
So she writes these Bible studies, and her method is called, I'm just pulling the book down, is called Focused 15. And so the idea is that these are daily Bible studies that you can do in 15 minutes, and they're fairly meaty. Like, the goal is to just look at a single passage in 5 different ways over the course of a week, and then you dive into the next passage. And so she wrote these studies to empower moms to be able to do Bible study in 15 minutes a day, if that's all they have. And they all have a section like go deeper if you have more time and that kind of thing. But I actually just started Everyday Faith, which is one of this series, because I felt like, okay, I can lay the baby on the floor now and he'll look at my face and be happy, and I can hold the Bible on my lap. And so I can get back to having my physical Bible in my hand. And so I've just started one of these, but I've been familiar with her process for a while, and it's a really neat kind of Bible study process if you just need a way to kind of dive into God's word, in a short period of time each day. And the other is I just got actually a preview of the book from Karen Ehman and Ruth Schwenk, which is called Pressing Pause. And these are, more devotional type. They're not Bible study, but the book is beautiful, and the devotional entries are encouraging. And so I think just finding something little where you can appreciate beauty, where you can have encouragement and that kind of thing can make a difference if you just set aside that time. Maybe you need to go outside to do it, to get that fresh air, or maybe you need to, make your cup of coffee to drink with it, or just a little way to remember who you are in this process of postpartum, and to connect with God, and to make time for yourself in what can be kind of a hamster wheel of days that just run one after another.
Yeah, I love what you've said, and you've said it actually multiple times through our conversation, but about finding ways to work in scripture and biblical encouragement into your days. I don't know about you, but, there was some advice early on that I came across in my mothering, like, you have to set that time with the Lord. And if you don't get up and start your day right, then you're apt to forget it. And what I'm hearing you say is that you kind of don't do that. Is that right? I mean, do you start every single day that way?
I don't. And it actually, that became kind of a stumbling block for me for a long time, like maybe 10 years, where I felt like this is such pressure, almost to where I was tying my salvation to my quiet time. Like, I'm failing. I didn't get up to do this. And as a work-at-home mom, I've always worked in the early morning hours. And I've always found that if I try to do Bible study before those early morning work hours, that I rush through it because I know I have all this pressure of work coming up. And so for a long time, that's been a struggle where I either wasn't really investing in my Bible study or I was just feeling guilty about it. And so being willing to say, oh, hey, here's this app I can open during the 4 a.m. feeding and read this encouragement, or here's this book in Bible study I can sit down with when the baby reaches his happy point at 10 a.m. or whatever it might be, has made me more excited rather than forgetting about it. It makes it something I want to do and want to make time for.
I love that. I love it. Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to share and tell listeners where they can find you online?
You can find me at lifeyourway.net sometimes. So part of this whole idea of like being realistic about what you can do is that because I do have a full-time job, my blogging has taken a back seat during this season. And so I blog sometimes once or twice a week, and sometimes I go a couple weeks without blogging. I'm getting excited again, which tells me we're coming out of this kind of early fog of having a new baby. And so I think I'll be blogging there more in the coming months. But that's where you can find me when I'm ready to start polishing my thoughts and writing again. And I think I have a feeling that this next 6 months or whatever is coming up will be a lot about this idea of balancing our responsibilities as moms, balancing homeschooling and having littles at the same time as bigs, and working or blogging or whatever your passion is as a mom, and how to balance those things, because that's been heavy on my heart as I talk to other friends who are in the same place and struggling to figure it out as well. And I think we all have a lot of encouragement to share with one another about how we make that work.
I love it. Well, great. This has been so wonderful. I think it'll be helpful for listeners, and I've just enjoyed getting to talk with you. It's actually our first time to get to talk, and so it's been very fun for me.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Jess. I was honored to be asked to be on here, so it's been a fun conversation.
I trust this was encouraging for you as it was for me. If you missed part 1, be sure to go back and check out part 1 of my conversation with Mandi Ehman. Be sure to come back next time for episode 5, where we'll talk with Emily Jensen about loving and mothering a lot of little children. Thanks for listening to the Mom on Purpose podcast. For more information and all links and show notes, go to momonpurpose.com. You can make a huge difference in how many women find and benefit from this podcast. Please like Mom on Purpose on iTunes and take 2 minutes to leave a review. I'll meet you again next time to equip you to be a mom on purpose.